Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Voices of Forestry podcast. I'm your host, Seth Stevenson, the Communications Coordinator for the Arkansas Forestry Association. Now, if you're new here, let me give you a quick overview of how this podcast works and what this podcast is. We are simply an educational podcast trying to bring you guys information on forestry and the various aspects of forestry. I'm learning this as well. I'm relatively new to the association, so there's a lot of stuff that I don't know quite yet, but we're bringing in experts to help teach me and teach you guys. And today, our expert is Luke Lewis with the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission. Luke, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
Now, today we're going to be doing something a smidge different. We're going to be talking about wildlife. And right out the gate, I just said we were a forestry podcast, but don't worry, there's a tie-in, and we're going to get to that here soon. But Luke, what I would like, if you don't mind, just kind of tell the people who you are.
Well, good. Well, I'm Luke Lewis, Assistant Chief of Wildlife for the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission. I've been an employee for a little over a year now, so I'm still trying to figure out what I'm going to be when I grow up. 62 years old and 40-year career as a wildlife biologist with various companies, 20 with Willamette Industries out of Louisiana and Arkansas, timber company there that's now Weyerhaeuser. So I spent the first part of my career there and last 15 years with the National Wild Turkey Federation as a wildlife biologist and a director of development. And had a chance to come to Little Rock, moved from Louisiana about a year and 2 months ago. And we've settled in Bryant, Arkansas, and work here in Little Rock at the headquarters. And my role here is to work with our private lands biologists, the wild turkey program, the quail, bobwhite quail program, the feral hog program, which was kind of, oh, by the way, you got that, but it's a pretty big program. And then I supervise the wildlife management areas in the south central and southwest part of the state, which is a big timber area for our state.
Yeah, and that's
Gulf Coastal Plain.
Yeah, that's what we were talking about last month with our guest, was that the South is really where we see a lot of our forestry stuff. And you working with timber companies just kind of meshes both worlds together.
Absolutely.
Perfectly.
Both timber companies and consultants. You know 90% of our land in the state is privately owned, so. Just being able to have the ability, when we said there's really no separation in my mind from wildlife and timber. Some foresters or biologists might think that, but every decision a forester makes has a wildlife implication. So, that's one thing I've learned in my career is that, landowners having a plan for their property for both forestry and if they're interested in wildlife, what they can do to encourage or improve habitat for certain species. I think that's a must. It's not just you buy land and it's going to take care of itself. And so we have a lot of folks with American Tree Farm System, and and just a lot of leasing that goes on, a lot of land that's available for public hunting, private hunting clubs. We're blessed in this state. It's a lot of public land as well as, like I said, 90% of the land being privately owned. So it's important that people, have a plan going forward for their, their status now, or their children or their grandchildren. And wood products in the South are, probably behind oil and gas, are one of the leading industries in our state. And we have challenges to move some of this timber, as you guys know, especially the first thinnings. But we see good markets right now with some of the larger, chip and saw and board timber that, with COVID-19, everybody's been doing a lot of fix-up, and Lowe's and Home Depot can't seem to keep enough lumber there.
Yeah, you kind of have to. The theme over these past couple episodes is, take our current status with an asterisk, in forestry markets and stuff like that with an asterisk because of COVID. But according to, we spoke to Dr. Pelkey a couple months ago, and things seem to be hopefully looking up if we just get past this one little hump. So
well, trees are growing. That doesn't stop. Something's out there growing on the landscape. You want it to be something that hopefully is economically and beneficial and it's good for wildlife. And I think that this connection between forestry and wildlife is so important. So many things I've seen in my career with sustainable forestry initiative, with certifications that people have to have now to move timber, whether it's a timber company or now even private landowners having preference for that. So there are some things with best management practices that have evolved, and certainly managing your land for endangered species. The wildlife side's become more relevant, more so than you might have seen 30 or 40 years ago, where you kind of cut timber and did it like you wanted to, just with water quality and so on. So we're faced with a lot of challenges, but I think we're living in the best of times for wildlife. In my lifetime, we see the wild turkey doing very well. We see great numbers of white-tailed deer in our state. We're certainly working to try to address the CWD concerns in kind of north, central, northwest part of the state. And our agency has really, we're spending $5 million in the next 5 years to do research on this with the University of Georgia.
The chronic wasting disease?
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. And, I would just say to people out there listening that, we really need to think that we might not have deer, to see a deer in your backyard. Sometimes you might not want to see them in your flower bed, but just something that we take for granted, seeing them on the side of the road. And we've got places in some of the counties in, central Arkansas where, deer are sick and very lethargic. It's a pretty pitiful sight, when you see one of these animals in that condition. So our agency is working really hard to address this issue, and we want to really communicate with people about this. It's incumbent that, as we take samples, it's part of the brainstem that we do our samples on your property. If you harvest a deer, taking the time to pull that brainstem, and we've got information about how to do that. I've brought some stuff today, but you can go to our website and find the locations for drop-off spots where we have coolers. There's over 500 to 600 kind of coolers that you can actually, place those in. There's some in every county. And we even want people to participate, outside the CWD zone, because we're tracking this. We want to see if there's any movement, and we just don't want to bury our heads in the sand to try to determine, where we are and if it's up or down and that kind of thing. So,
and if you could explain to me how exactly this disease affects deer.
Well, when they contract it, it's a kind of an airborne disease, if I'm not mistaken. I hope I don't get this wrong. We probably need to have our veterinarians and people that do this a little bit more than I am. But I think it's a neurological disease, and I'm just have to look at my notes here. You kind of caught me off guard.
Oh no, I'm.
But it's one that really has been. We've got blue tongue and other diseases that we've had in the past that have affected deer, especially in the south part of the state. We're not sure how this came to our state. Some people speculate, from the elk. We find it in both elk and whitetails. It could have come from deer that were transported into the state. This was a concern or disease, especially in the western states like Wyoming, Colorado, and other states like Michigan and Wisconsin have had this for years. But we've got it now. There's really no way to trace how it got here, and we're just trying to take care of the herd that we've got and manage it at a level that, because they come in contact with one another. They're very social animals. They'll actually touch each other, nuzzle each other with their noses, and they mark their territory with a lot of different scent glands on their head primarily. So it's and they're a social animal. You see family groups and things like that. So it can be contracted pretty easily, through a herd in itself. So our goal is to try to, you think about concentrating deer. So I'd be remiss if I said that, you're going to ask people to stop baiting, putting out corn, but you have to think about concentrating deer in feeders or a place that happens. So that's one of the things that we don't allow in those counties that we have a high incidence of is baiting for deer. At least it's a seasonal baiting. We can do it during deer season, but outside of the hunting season, you can't use corn or some type of bait to concentrate them. And this is just an effort to try to take care of the resource. And so I would just say to the folks out there, if you're a landowner, you enjoy these animals, if you have hunting that's done on your property, whether it's a club or an individual, just please participate. You can go to our website, agfc.org, and there's plenty of information, some drop downs about this, where the drop-off zones are and things like that, or the locations to take your sample to do that. So we're all in this together, whether we're managing for CWD or feral hogs, which have become epidemic in our state. They're in all 75 counties. Our staff spent about 18,000 hours of trapping time in 2019, and in our 19-20 fiscal year, our staff actually removed over 5,000 hogs.
Oh, wow.
in the state. And we have a Arkansas Feral Hog Task Force made up of 22 members, and we're just one part of that. Department of Ag and APHIS have capacity people to do feral hog trapping, and we're working with our AACD districts with Debbie Moreland and her folks there in each of these counties to just to get the word out about what do you do, who do you call if feral hogs show up on your land. And I want to make sure people out there understand that this is not an anti-hunting movement, but it is a species that was brought in here. It's not native to Arkansas or to the U.S. actually. And if you look at the spread of feral hogs, their productivity is very aggressive. And in the last 20 years, we've just seen them go from Salina River bottom to all counties of the state. A lot of that was due to transport of hogs by landowners to get them on their land. So but we're seeing things like water quality issues. You've got brucellosis and some diseases that you find in water. It can be contagious to other animals and things like that. So anyway, it's just trying to get a control on them. In my lifetime or my time here with AGFC, I don't think we're going to totally eradicate them, but we have a plan to move forward. That might sound a little harsh, but at the end of the day, you got to decide if you want them or you don't on your land.
Well, and this is, in the past, the 2 years that I've been here, CWD, chronic wasting disease, and feral hogs are two things that I feel like I've heard a good amount, even before I started here at the association. So these are two big issues for CWD for the deer population, and it seems like feral hogs for just the overall wildlife population. And correct me if I'm wrong here, but these feral hogs aren't like deer where they just kind of run off if you get too close, that they're aggressive and potentially dangerous.
Well, they can be, especially if you get around a female with her piglets and things like that. They're very they group together and protective, I guess. They have their small, what we call sounders, which are the herds, family groups. Usually a female after 6 months can have 2 litters a year, anywhere from 6 to 8 piglets. So their reproduction capacity, it's just, we can't keep up with the trapping that we're doing right now. And our partner, APHIS, which is Wildlife Services, Robert Bird's the director out of Sherwood, is going to be having a staff of 19 people by the end of the year that just APHIS will be available to do feral hog trapping in our state. It's a $19 million cost to landowners, ranchers, and farmers in 2019. So, this is not an issue about hunting, it's an issue about economics. And from a wildlife standpoint, these animals are out there competing with deer and turkeys and squirrels, and I mean, they're just aggressive. They're going to be kind of the king of the feeder or food plot or acorn production, and they've only predators they have are coyotes when they're very young, and other than that, once they get up 50, 60 pounds, they can defend themselves. So it's a big issue, and there's a lot of people on both sides of the fence that want to keep them and hunt them for sport, and there's a lot that I can assure you in the year I've been here, I've heard many very upset landowners about what they're doing to their pastures for haying, for soybean, rice production, catfish production. So they get into areas and root and kind of destroy some of these areas and cause leakage and just a lot of havoc on the landscape itself where they tear up when they're doing their thing rooting. So our agency, APHIS, Department of Ag, has just hired a new feral hog coordinator who used to work for us as our feral hog coordinator, J.P. Fairhead. He went to work there in January, and he is actually the chairman of the Feral Hog Task Force now. We have been very fortunate to work with NRCS to get a $3.2 million grant in 22 counties to hire additional people to support APHIS in trapping. They're basically doing the location of feral hogs. They put out the bait. Then folks with APHIS, the folks that are employed by them, will come in and actually set the trap up. So they're doing some trapping efforts and outreach with landowners in these counties. And as we move forward with this, we still have another 50 plus counties that don't have, quote, a designated person to trap. But some of these folks with APHIS are available. I just tell folks that, we're coming out with an article in Front Porch Magazine next week that it will help people if you have them on their land. Who do you call? And I think that's the first step is, when they show up and they're doing things to your property that you're not pleased with, where are the resources to do that?
Okay. And then that article should, by the time this comes out, be available to folks if you want to go and look for that. And this is, again, correct me if I'm wrong here, but chronic wasting disease in feral hogs isn't just an Arkansas problem.
Oh, no.
There are other states dealing with similar issues.
That's absolutely right. And the whole southeast United States, even the upper Midwest, Michigan, if you just Google feral swine, activity in the United States, and for folks out there to see where we were 20 years ago as opposed to today, it's pretty incredible. I mean, it's a growing problem. It's a problem on our public lands, our national forests. It's 3 million acres. I turkey hunt out there, and I can tell you, they're there. Okay. They're there, and they're growing. Their numbers are growing. That's not to scare folks, but I'm just saying you can't just ignore this, problem that you've got. And once it starts hitting people economically, I mean, I can think. My second day here on this job, I was at the Farm Bureau office at a Feral Hog Task Force meeting, and green as a gourd, still am, and got to see the concern. I won't say passion. It wasn't passion. People are upset. They're mad at them, and they're mad at what they're doing. And you have, gentlemen in southwest Arkansas. I'm trying to think of what county it's in. Clark County called me one day and said, I got 1,100 acres that I've cut T-posts in half and put a hot wire around my hay field. So just the cost, to try to protect, his investment to cut hay for his cattle is a big deal. Another gentleman in Ashley County, we were in Felsenthal, and he plants soybeans, and he said, I planted my Roundup Ready soybeans 3 times at $300 a bag for these soybeans. And so they're not happy. And, but that does go against the grain of some folks that want to, manage and hunt them for sport. I understand that. But, we've just not been able to keep them in control, by hunting. And so trapping the entire sounder is our best method. It's not perfect, but we try to catch the whole group, and very sophisticated now with round traps of 30 feet in width. And we actually monitor those with an infrared camera. And so hopefully the landowner professionals take the time to determine the group size. And some of these hogs have become trap shy and won't go in a trap like that, and they have to be shot, or there's opportunities to shoot them or hunt them with a dog to try to get those numbers down. But this is a numbers game, trying to knock them down to a level that we can live with. And so the key here in the next year, I think, with this working group, we want to first of all make it easy for people in any county to know where to go to get assistance in this, and just understand the economic concerns in this from why it's hopefully justified to a degree of why we're trying to control this. It'd be like any other pest, southern pine beetle, anything like that. You're going CWD. We're looking at things. Beavers on your land. I mean, they're just they have very few predators, and you've got to do things to manage that landscape, if you want to protect your resources and, what's wildlife or timber. So anyway, the second thing that we'd like to try to accomplish is really getting a handle. At that meeting, we were asked how many hogs do we have in the state. Well, we don't know. We just got a lot. We got a lot. And they're in every county. And so it's not like it was 20 years ago. I was moving up here in Labor Day weekend with my two brother-in-laws somewhere in Grant County on 167 coming from Louisiana, and there was 5 hogs in the ditch there, and my brother-in-law called me on the cell phone and says, "You're not doing very good as supervisors." There they are in the ditch, So, I mean, they're it's not uncommon to see them, So, and then when they get pressure, they get nocturnal. They're a pretty smart animal, actually, and got a great sense of smell. So, anyway, the good thing, if you can say it's good, is that we've got, including the Arkansas Forestry Association is a member, was one of the 22 members of this group, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And, so we're all in this together. This is not an AGFC problem. People think because it's an animal that we should be responsible. It's not a recognized game animal. So they were introduced to this area. But, we are dedicated. We have probably 50 people that part-time work trapping hogs in our organization. And as I said right now, I'm very impressed with APHIS's attention to this. Their folks are full-time. They'll have 19 people working in the state. They're continuing to hire folks right now. And then we'll have 10 other folks with the NRCS grant that have been hired or will be hired by the fall to support them. So we're building some capacity to help people and landowners, and I think that's important. And at the same time, I could, if we had the time, I could tell you many, many testimonies of people that I've met in just a short time I've been here that didn't wait on someone like a state or federal agency to take care of this. And they've learned how to trap hogs. They're catching 200 hogs a year on their property, landowners. And they've got a game plan, about how to address this when they show up on their land. I think that's where we really want to be 10 years from now, is that, people, whether they want to roll up their sleeves and do it themselves, or who can I call to get some help, to do this. And, that just takes a lot of good communication and understanding of, how to network together. And so we really want to do that. We're working on an app right now. The Arkansas Game and Fish uses it. We've actually got, it's called Survey 123, and it's something that you can load on your phone. And we have one for quail and turkey sightings. We've got one for deer observations, and now we have one for feral hog observations and trapping incidents. So we can actually, our staff's using this now and inputting this into their phones on site. Creates a location. It's information that we keep internally. It's not something we share if it's on private land. And which, by the way, we trapped 57% of our people's time was on private land last year, so it wasn't just on our wildlife management areas.
Okay.
But it's a great tool. It's going to help us get to that question about how many hogs are you taking and eliminating each year. I think when we go to these legislative meetings, when we're at Farm Bureau meetings, when we're talking to landowners, it's important that you can pull this app up and you can see if people are using it and putting information in there. What is the total hogs in 2020
Yeah.
that have been eliminated.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got a location there where you can go to the county and punch that on, and within 30 seconds we can tell you, at least we're building this program right now about what's being taken from year to year, and it gives us that trend data. So that's very important. That's the way you decide if $3.2 million is well spent.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a lot of resources out there. We've got professional trappers that we can connect landowners with that are like a consultant. Some wonderful people that across our state that do things like this. And then in some locations, APHIS is actually using some other ways to remove hogs by aerial gunning, mostly in our agriculture lands, like in the east. We did, I think they shot over 900 in eastern Arkansas and another 250 on Fort Chaffee this last year. So
Wow.
They're looking at trying to house a full-time helicopter here in Arkansas to work both our state and Missouri in the next year. So, I can't say enough about APHIS and their attention to the work that we're doing now. I mean, and they are really the tip of the spear.
Yeah.
We're supporting them.
Well, it seems like this is a group effort, not only from you guys and from other organizations, but from landowners and from individuals.
Absolutely.
Because you guys can't be everywhere at once, and you don't really, you don't know where they are, how many they are. So with the help of landowners who spot them, that helps you guys out tremendously.
Well, absolutely, and just kind of by default with JP leaving, we're hiring another feral hog coordinator. Hopefully, he'll be on here in September. And so for the last 6 months, it was kind of, drinking from a fire hose for me to kind of just keep this program floating. And there's tremendous time and resources that we're spending just on this one species for control. And so it's a decision that landowners and us as agencies have to make about we're going to just let them continue to expand as a nuisance, and they are.
And that kind of plays into the health of forest land. I mean, you mentioned soybean, hay. This is every type of land is affected, it seems, at least by these feral hogs. But I would be remiss if we didn't kind of touch on too just the relationship between a healthy forest land, kind of bringing it back to forestry, and wildlife. Could you kind of talk a little bit about that relationship?
And I think the hard thing for me, I think we're still learning about impacts of feral hogs on, let's say, industrial land or tree farm land and things like that. I wish I could say that they would go into a pine plantation that's just been planted and there's destruction there enough that would warrant the same type of attention that farmers and people that ranch and run cattle have on their land. We don't know that yet, but I can tell you this: just some incidental things about this. And I managed 1,200 hunting clubs with Willamette for 15 years, and I had a lot of experience working with clubs there with DMAP, which is another program I'd love to touch on a little bit, Deer Management Assistance Program. But people spend a lot of money to be in a hunting lease or to hunt. In fact, you probably want to be careful how much you talk about it. If your wife hears how much you're spending on some of this, you'd be in a doghouse. But and so if you're sitting in a deer stand, if you're in a climbing stand, if you're using supplemental feed like corn to bait and attract deer, if you're planting a food plot, which by the way, if you put a pencil to it, you're spending between $250 and $300 an acre to put in a supplemental food plot. And in one night in an acre, hogs can come in and totally destroy a wheat, oat, clover food plot. They're going to be in our rice farms. They're going to be in our soybean fields as those crops develop, and they're utilizing that as a food source. They're kind of omnivorous in the fact, and they're very opportunistic. They can feed on a lot of different things, your feral hogs do. So, but at the end of the day, if someone's spending a good bit of money to be in a hunting lease or just to hunt on their own property, I guess it's kind of like most folks in the past maybe wanted to have their cake and eat it too. It's good to have turkeys, deer, hogs, a lot of different things. It gives you a variety that you're out there. And I've eaten a lot of wild hog. I've shot hogs, but I've also watched just how those animals act around one another, and deer don't want to be around them. Mm-hmm. And if you're in a hunting club and you spend all this money, you're not seeing deer on your one or two deer stands out there. It could be that and you're seeing rooting up and down a shooting lane or something like that. It's probably that these hogs are pretty much keying in on when that feeder's going off, and they're the first ones to the trough, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So I think it's one thing that we've got to determine. I think this is a great thing to work with companies like Weyerhaeuser, Potlatch, Malpas, RMS, some of our larger companies that do leasing, to look at some of this. But what I can tell, even coming to meetings here at the Forestry Association here in Arkansas, economically it's not been a big detrimental concern. They're not going in and just rooting up seedlings. Mm-hmm. Those seedlings do have fertilizer attached to them if they're containerized seedlings, and sometimes there could be a value to those hogs rooting that root and eating that fertilizer, because that most of our animals getting nutrition that's lacking in the soil, whether it's deer or hogs, mm-hmm. from plants that are grown. But in my mind, and this is just speculation, so time will have to tell, but 10 years after that seedling's been established, if they've been in there and they've done a lot of rooting around that tree, my question would be is, what does the form and quality of that tree look like? Mm-hmm. There's not been any research done in that capacity. I guess this is probably more of I wish they were a problem, so that we would have, individuals that manage timberlands and landowners, understand that they're a problem. But I would say right now, we know that they're a competitor with mm-hmm. wildlife. And part of my growing up was working for Plum Creek and Mossy Oak Properties in real estate for about 3 years. And today people buy land as much for recreation mm-hmm. as they do the timber. They're really buying it for both. They're letting the land work with them. And that's why, I kind of segue into the wonderful opportunities that we see out there. If I could, just give a tip to landowners, the funding that is available through USDA, NRCS, Natural Resources Conservation Service, under various programs like EQIP, which is Environmental Quality Incentive Program, a lot of acronyms.
Yeah.
Conservation Stewardship Program, Wetland Reserve easements. Take the time to go to your county NRCS office and sit down and visit with that district conservationist about what you'd like to see on your land and what your land can yield for you, mm-hmm. both from a timber standpoint and a wildlife standpoint. I've been blessed over the years. I guess my greatest joy in this job, if I could say one thing, is being helping people. And helping people means for them to understand what they can do on their land to make that land work for them. Mm-hmm. And whether it's wildlife or timber or other resources that are out there that people take advantage of. And so one of the opportunities that we're working on, there's the United States has what we call joint ventures, and they're regions of the United States that Fish and Wildlife Service have designated as places where we have common landscapes. We live in one that I work in the southwest part of the state, called the West Gulf Coast Conservation Delivery Network. That's a long name. So we have a coordinator, Bill Bardis, that lives in Tyler, but this encompasses East Texas, Northwest Louisiana, Southwest Arkansas, and Southeast Oklahoma. And you can Google that, West Gulf Coast CDN, if you can remember that, and see a map of this area. But what we're really excited about, we have a working group made up of mm-hmm. NGOs and state and federal agencies that have been kind of got together, timber companies, consultants like Neely Forestry mm-hmm. are part of this. Ricky O'Neill has been on our working group. And we're now, on Thursday of last week, there was an announcement of this Regional Conservation Partnership Program. It's called an RCPP grant, another acronym. this has just been announced. There's $360 million for the United States. It's set up through the Farm Bill for states to either work together collectively or individually to apply for grants. And it's a 50-50 match, so we've got to come up with match to do this. But you can actually apply for up to $10 million. So the redneck value of this is, whether it's $1 million or $10 million, 70% of that, once you take administrative costs out of it for the people that administer it, can be available for private landowners to do early succession work. So timber stand improvement, prescribed burning, installation of native warm season grasses, things that can be rolled into a management plan, which we talked about early in our conversation about a landowner should, whether it's timber or wildlife, should always think about a professional either from Game and Fish or Department of Forestry here. Quail Forever has biologists that can work with you. They're one of our partners that are working very closely with us to help a landowner develop a plan for his land. They can still farm, they can still ranch, but there's edges that you can always tweak and improve for wildlife. Most people out there, they're farming and ranching. Timber management is first and foremost. The secondary benefit, which is a pretty important one, is wildlife. So we're hoping we have a submission process we're going through for the next 3 months. November 4th will be when we submit that. We'll hear something after the first of the year in 2022. But if we're lucky enough to get this grant, we're going to be able, in about 7 counties in South Arkansas, provide about 75 or 80% cost share assistance to do this work on private landowners' property. There's 12 wildlife management areas that were kind of our focus areas or our hubs that will rank landowners to be in close proximity. We're dealing with things with endangered species and water quality and all of this, but just trying to stimulate or encourage landowners to do more on their property. If you drive through South Arkansas, North Louisiana, Northeast Texas, Southeast Oklahoma, and you look in the mid-story, basically underneath the bigger timber that's growing, we've got a tremendous problem with competition for hardwood and even not noxious weeds such as privet and other things that are competing for the growth of that timber. So there's a lack of fire on our landscape today, and certainly there's concerns there from smoke management around major cities and just the liability in that. But I know the Forestry Association has worked on that opportunity to help landowners in that facet. But if we could ever get old Bubba out there that wants to go put out his corn at $5 a bag or plant his food plot for $300 an acre, to think about a prescribed burn that costs about $40 an acre and has just as much value to wildlife as what he's doing, and that's year round. Because a deer's eating 6 pounds of forage a day. Turkeys and quail, 90% of their diet, first 6 weeks of their life, is insects. And so creating that open canopy savanna, if you can use that terminology, in a timber stand is where we would love to be. That's going to increase the capacity for all of those species, the health and the numbers. So, I'd just like to make sure that, again, people can reach out to us, Quail Forever. We have a staff of 11 private lands biologists. You can go to our website and find contact information for them. I would be remiss to say our partners such as Arkansas Department of Forestry. They do stewardship plans for timber management, and we collaborate with them in many cases to bring a forester and a biologist out on the site. So you're getting 2 eyes looking at a piece of property and making recommendations for that gumbo that you're stirring up. So, landowners need to start right there. And then, you can go into the NRCS offices and actually set up a farm and tract number, look at these different programs that could benefit your land, and even opt out.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, till you go and look, as my daddy always says, it doesn't hurt to go look.
Yep.
And talk to people.
Absolutely.
And look at what you can do and take advantage of it. If there's one real important tip I could give people, is that from a financial standpoint, you can find no better cost shares than with USDA and in RCS right now. There's not a grant on a year-to-year basis. This is a wonderful agency to work with. You've got to be patient. Wheels turn slow sometimes with federal government. Sometimes you don't get accepted in enrollment the first year you apply. But if you get some technical assistance from one of these biologists to help, that knows what's going to rank that request for funding, things like pollinator habitat for monarch butterflies or pollinator species, and landowners out there might say, well, that's cool, it's just monarch butterflies. Well, monarch butterflies could be the surrogate for brood habitat for wild turkeys and quail.
Mm-hmm.
So in my mind, doesn't matter what we call it, we're working on that condition, the grass availability of food, water, and cover out there on the landscape, and producing some quality vegetation. You can remove that mid-story hardwood component of sweet gum and other hardwoods out there in that site that's really competing with your saw timber that you're trying to work toward. Every timber company does this. They use spray regime, site prep. Some prescribe burning, not as much as they used to, but certainly they're doing things out there to move that timber, further into that production stage of harvesting. So, South Arkansas, from Little Rock south and from the Delta going back west, it's unbelievable breadbasket of timber, with landowners.
Oh yeah.
And it's a great resource for our state. I guess the analogy I make is that wildlife in these programs within RCS, the grants like this RCPP grant, if we're fortunate enough to get it, it's money above what the state is receiving each year in Farm Bill for various programs. Very competitive. I think there's only about maybe 6 of these that are given out in the nation. It may be a few more than that now, but it's very competitive. I mean, when you say $360 million, it sounds like a lot, but what I'm very happy with is that we kind of took a deep breath in thinking about this, and we've been working with Entergy, with Enable Midstream, and 4 of the 17 Arkansas electric co-ops. And these companies do what we call IVM, and that's another acronym that stands for Integrated Vegetative Management.
Mm-hmm.
So when people drive down the highway and they see a right-of-way that's sprayed, and they see what I'd call skeletons, it's basically pines and hardwoods that have grown for 3 years. They've been sprayed, and they're doing this so that those trees don't grow up into the line and disrupt service.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a maintenance. If you like to turn your lights on, they side trim, they keep that floor clean, they want it in grasses, forbs, and legumes. Guess what? That's primo habitat for a lot of wildlife out there, from pollinators to quail to turkeys to that deer that I said is eating 6 pounds of forage a day. He's not eating a sweet gum tree that's 6 feet tall, I can tell you. So you're improving that habitat. So the beauty of this is, in RCS, we're working with a lady, Diane Schrinkler, who's over the grants program, has said that some of the maintenance that these companies do is going to qualify for early succession habitat improvement. So we are very optimistic that over half of this $10 million is going to come from in the 5 years that we're doing the grant, is going to come from the maintenance of these companies, both in Louisiana and Arkansas. We got our fingers crossed. I'm the eternal optimist. My daddy said you got to throw the bait to catch a fish.
Exactly.
So, but we're excited. And, what this translates in is, if that money is garnered in those 7 counties, it's not statewide, but in those 7 counties, it's going to be a great financial resource for people to tap into. We've got the capacity to help folks write the plans. So, I'm just so happy that these partners, we don't have to go to them and say, hey, can you give us $500,000 in cash? That ain't gonna happen. But the fact that they do this maintenance, every 2 years on their right of way, NRCS justifies, the improvement to the landscape, and we're able to use that as match. I mean, that's incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one thing too that we've been trying to, I guess, get across over these past couple episodes is everything's connected. Proper management on your forest land will help with the wildlife. And absolutely. I know it's probably an overgeneralization, but a good chunk of our landowners are also hunters. So they're not going out there to wreck the land and not have the wildlife there, whether they hunt it or they just like having it out there. They're doing it properly, they're doing it right to keep things healthy and keep things balanced, I guess is the right way to say
Seth,
that.
I tell you what, if you don't think it's a big deal, I'll ask your listeners out there in August and September, watch up and down the highways, all these trailers going up and down the road, trucks with pallets of corn and people with tractors to plant food plots. It is a big deal in this state.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I've lived here all my life, and I know how big a deal it is. But, well, Luke, we've run out of time here. Thank you so much. We'll have to have you back again because there's a lot more that we can cover in the future. But thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. We appreciate the Arkansas Forestry Association and partnerships that you and Max and everybody here share with us as agencies and what you're doing for private landowners.
Hey, we're just doing our jobs at this point. But we'll make sure and link the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission website in the description of this episode. We'll also try to get you guys a link if you're curious about the RCPP, the Regional Conservation Partnership Program. We'll get you a link to read more on that. I'm looking at a printout of it. It is relatively new as of this recording. Yep. It came out August 6th.
That's correct.
Of this year, so it's brand new.
And we're hoping for this. It's not, you don't want to be an Indian giver about all this, but I would just tell people, one last thing is take the time to get to know the folks in your county within RCS. They're a great resource, and then tap into some of the professionals that can help you from the forestry and wildlife community create a plan. That's the take home today.
Create a plan. Got it.
For your land.
Absolutely. Well, Luke, thank you again. And thank you guys for joining us this month. We'll be back next month with a brand new episode and a brand new guest. But we also, like always, want to say thank you to some guy named Rob McCormick for the use of our theme song, The Same Love. That's off of his album, The Folkster, which you can find on Spotify or wherever you get your music. If you want to know more information about the Arkansas Forestry Association, you can visit our website at arkforest.org. That's ARKFORESTS.org. And I also am going to add a little shameless plug here. We've got our annual meeting coming up at the end of September. It starts on September 29th and goes through October 1st. It is going to be a virtual meeting, which is brand new for us, but we've got some incredible speakers, some people coming in to talk about various topics. We've got CEOs and presidents of companies coming to talk about cross-laminated timber and all sorts of stuff. And we also have a landowner workshop that will take place on September 29th with some more great speakers. So if you want information on that, you can find that in our event site or on our calendar at arkforest.org. But once again, thank you for joining us. I've been Seth Stevenson, and thank you for listening to the Voices of Forestry.